been a superb week for Newcastle United as they go forth in two different cup competitions. After booking their place in the League Cup final against Liverpool, they're now into the FA Cup 5th round after victory at Birmingham City. In this video I'm going to examine the win at St Andrews, but also counter it with a little bit of a warning about the squad's depth. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Before we get going, as always, please do continue to like, share and subscribe to the channel and the videos. I really appreciate all the support as always. I know I keep saying this at the beginning of each video, but I'm looking to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the season, and your support means the world to me. I really enjoy making these videos. Let me know what you think about Newcastle's win over Birmingham in the comment section below, and also any other ideas for different content you want to see on this channel. I really do want to make this as interactive as possible. I want you to feel like you can contact me and get to know me a little bit more if that's what you want to do, and all of that sort of thing is very much open to me, so drop down in the comments below with any thoughts you have. But we'll get straight into the video and look back at Newcastle's win on Saturday night at St Andrews. 3-2. It was an absolute barnstormer of a game. But credit to Birmingham, League One side, unbeaten in 18 games. It was always going to be very difficult because Birmingham have such a ambitious project behind them. Tom Wagner, Tom Brady, really steamrolling them, trying to steamroll them back into the Premier League, let alone the Championship. They look like they're going to get promotion at the first time of asking this year, but they've spent a lot of money, particularly on strikers. Jay Stansfield up front for them on Saturday cost them £15 million, or up to £15 million. Alfie May came off the bench as well, seasoned League One goal scorer. So they've got a lot of quality at that level. They also know how to create an atmosphere and create an occasion, and they really did that in that first half. It was really difficult. An early goal from Ethan Laird, then Newcastle get back in the lead through Joe Willock and Callum Wilson. I will talk about Joe Willock's goal in a second, and then Iwata's goal was an absolute stunner to go in at 2-2, and then Joe Willock wins it in the second half. Lots of things to talk about across the game, obviously, but I do want to give credit to Birmingham for that first half display. They were absolutely brilliant. They took the game to Newcastle. It was very much a classic cup tie. The game can't really exist properly without VAR. As much as we love to hate it, as much as we criticise the use of it and the way it's done, and the way that the referees rely on it and all that sort of thing, I think principally the fact that goal was given, and on Friday night when Leicester went out to Manchester United with a clearly offside goal, VAR is needed in some form to stop that, because there were two clear goals for me that shouldn't have been given. We'll focus on the Willock one, obviously mainly because that was in this game, but there's no way you can give that goal. There's no way you can give that goal at all. The linesman has guessed. Yes, it benefited Newcastle. Yes, we're all pleased about that. But the linesman guessed at that. There was absolutely no way. Bailey Peacock-Fell was definitely behind the line, and the ball was definitely over it, because it just didn't look like clear on either replay that we saw. But that came after an early goal conceded by Newcastle, who did the same against Bromley a lot later than that. But that sort of whole thing of maybe 9 changes made by Eddie Howe coming back to cause problems because the team wasn't connected properly. They didn't know that the rules were early corner. It's deep, it's headed back in across, and Ethan Laird fires it in via a deflection by Callum Wilson, and then Newcastle have to react. To their credit, I think they did, and even after Iwata's goal restored parity before half time, I thought Newcastle were still the better team without really having too much control of the midfield because of their wide players, because of Joe Willock and Will Osula, and we'll talk about them in detail in a minute. But the second half performance, I thought, from Birmingham was disappointing, if I'm honest. I think they traded in that sort of imposing nature, that sort of ability to play at Newcastle at their own game and get in Newcastle's faces in terms of their footballing quality and really causing problems. I didn't see too many issues for Nick Pope in that second half, and they traded that in to sort of ruffle Newcastle's feathers. Now we've seen teams do that to Newcastle this season. We saw Fulham do it last week, Bournemouth do it at St James's Park. That sort of stop-start game benefits them. It really does get into Newcastle's head, stop their rhythm and stop them playing. Yes, that's absolutely fair, and that's what they should do. But if you look at what was happening, Jay Stansfield throwing Fabian Schär into the advertising hoardings, the defender going for Joe Willock with no eyes for the ball. That clip's been doing the rounds with a lot of celebration from Birmingham fans. I think that's the sort of thing. It wasn't fair game, it wasn't physicality, it was just non-sportsmanship. And I think that's what needs mentioning. I think Birmingham, to their credit, they were fantastic in that first half. In the second half, they seemed to change their tactics and try to worry too much about what Newcastle were doing. Sandro Tonali came on at half-time and was absolutely phenomenal for Bruno Guimaraes, who didn't have the same impact on the game, I think, but I think Tonali I think it was easier for Tonali because Birmingham weren't putting as much pressure on him. In that sense, they were too busy trying to foul Newcastle's players. Before we talk about the main event of this game, which is Will Osula and Joe Willock, as I've mentioned, I do want to sort of say that the fragility of Newcastle's squad was sort of laid bare in this game. And yes, Newcastle got into the fifth round. The 2 games from Wembley, they obviously got to the Wembley final in the League Cup. They've won 19 of 23 cup games under Eddie Howe, which is absolutely phenomenal. It's a complete turnaround from the previous iteration of Newcastle where they just discarded the cups completely. Yeah, that's all fantastic, but Dan Burn picked up an injury and we're not sure how serious that is. Certainly I haven't heard by the time of the recording of this video. Anthony Gordon missed out with a quad problem. Sven Botman's on the sidelines already through a knee issue that is not apparently serious but picked up against Arsenal. Whether he'll be fit for Manchester City is touch and go. So the squad's fragility, and this was a problem that we came off with in January because of Almiron going and Lloyd Kelly going. Both of those players would have absolutely come in this game, for example. And suddenly the squad looks really, really fragile, and that's the problem. Can this squad survive? It's already looks stretched to its limit. Can this squad survive being stretched in 2 different directions? Because I think the League Cup, now that it's just the final, it's not a weekend, it's not really too much of a hassle in that sense. But if Newcastle go deep in the FA Cup, then there's going to be lots more midweek games, lots more stretching of this squad. That's exactly what Newcastle want, but this team is already on its bare bones. Joe Linton missed the game as well. There's a lot of sort of sentiment from the people I was talking to that Alexander Isak was on the bench, and if Newcastle needed him at 2-2 as it was looking like, should they bring him on? And would a victory be worth a potential injury to him, with that potentially risking Newcastle's ability to continue this form? Because his goals are the main reason, along with Sandro Tonali's brilliance in midfield and obviously the tactical switch that's brought through. Those are the 2 main reasons for Newcastle's upturn in form over the last couple of months. So if those players get injured, what happens then? And it really did feel like it might not have been worth the victory if Newcastle had to bring Isak on. Yes, they did bring him on for 10 seconds at the end of the game by the time it was already won, thanks to Joe Willock. But there is a bit of a warning about this squad not being strong enough for this whole big push for both trophies, because it is the best chance that they've got to win the FA Cup as well that they've had in years. There's no Liverpool, there's no Arsenal, there's no Chelsea, now no Tottenham as well. Yes, there's Manchester City, and obviously they knocked them out of the quarterfinals last year, but it really is a very open competition, and Man City aren't the team that they were last year, so there's a possibility. Newcastle, I think, are second or third favourites for the FA Cup at the moment, which is quite incredible, really. So there's a real opportunity to go there, but the squad doesn't have that strength, and it might come back to bite them in the short term that they've sold Almiron and Kelly, because we've seen Burns already gone down with an injury. What happens if him and Botman don't play against Manchester City? Does Emil Kraft come in, who's just come back from a long-term injury himself? So these are all questions that the decision-making of the January window might really impact in the short term. And I think lots of people had those fears. Yes, the headroom that they created with the PSR situation in the summer means that it's very, very likely that they can spend big then. But is that really going to be helpful when they're trying to go for potentially a domestic treble? They're the only team in England who can suddenly win the domestic treble. Obviously, they're not going to win the Premier League, and they're not favourites. They have to play Liverpool at Wembley in the League Cup. But this is the best opportunity Newcastle have ever had, both to qualify for the Champions League, but also to end that trophy drought of 70 years. And the squad, there is a bit of a fear over it being ready and able to really go into this at full tilt. Callum Wilson coming back though was absolutely brilliant. He played 54 minutes, scored a goal, of course, and showed exactly what he can bring. If he can continue to contribute here and there and push Alexander Isak as best as he can, and maybe come in for Alexander Isak at different points over the next few weeks. That'll be really, really huge. But this is why I really wanted to talk about Will Osula. He played on the right-hand side, but I thought he was fantastic. And to be honest, every time I'm seeing him, I'm getting more impressed. He's got all the raw ability. He's tall, he's physical, he's quick, he's got a good shot on him. His finishing and finesse will come, and his game intelligence, those are the things that he's potentially missing, but those are the things that you learn when you get more used to playing at the top level. So he's got all the attributes, and he's growing into confidence in a Newcastle shirt. I thought Birmingham really targeted him. He dealt really well with a lot of that. Also, his skill and his physicality and his power really helped impose himself on that right-hand side when I was a bit concerned if Jacob Murphy wasn't going to play there, what would happen. Osula on that right was brilliant. It showed his versatility. He's really good at creating chances for himself. So as I said when he first arrived, he can create things out of nothing for himself. He's going to be a very, very good target man going forward. But on the right hand side, the fact that he came in and did that job alongside Joe Willock, both of whom were playing out of position, but they both really imposed themselves. That was the difference in the game. It wasn't a midfield issue for me in this game. It was more that Newcastle used that width and Willock and Osula to really good effect, and that's going to help with the point I just made about the squad's depth and that lack of ability to change things when players are out injured. Harvey Barnes isn't back yet, as another example. So the fact that those players are coming to play different positions and had such an impact, and it's really important for Joe Willock to get his confidence back after a poor performance against Fulham and a difficult few weeks. Horrendous racist abuse that he received on social media last week, absolutely abhorrent. He thanked the fans for their support this week, and it's really good to see him with a smile on his face. He admitted after the game that he's had a difficult season. Hopefully this is a turning point for him, because he was really good. He took the game by the scruff of the neck and played like he can in terms of changing gear. That's my favourite way of describing what Joe Willock does, and he's quite unique in that sense of what he brings to the squad. No other midfielder really does that, and the fact that he can do that on the left as well is really, really beneficial to Newcastle and Eddie Howe going forward. And if him and Osula can come in and have an impact off the bench or starting games when the fixtures pile up, hopefully they will pile up a little bit, because it'll mean that Newcastle are going deep in this FA Cup campaign now, then that's a real positive, and Newcastle can maybe attack the rest of the season. But the big thing for me in this game was that Newcastle managed to come through it mostly unscathed. Yes, Dan Burns' injury is a possible worry, and obviously everything's in the context of the cup final now. Will he be fit for Wembley against Liverpool? Who knows yet? I certainly don't, as I said at the time of the recording, but really good performance overall from Newcastle. Willock took the game by the scruff of the neck. Will Osula made himself known. Wilson getting a goal. I think the key players who really took this game away from Birmingham were Tonali, Willock and Osula, and really, really good performance going into Manchester City next week, when hopefully Anthony Gordon will be back from his sort of minor quad issue. Joe Linton could be fit again, and Botman might be fit too. So hopefully some key players will be back in the fold, but it kind of shows the fragility of where Newcastle are at the moment, and there is that sort of difficulty of balancing that. But really, this is Newcastle's greatest opportunity for an unbelievable season in any of our lifetimes. If they won both and also somehow qualify for the Champions League, that would be a historic season. It isn't too far out of Newcastle's grasp, but they've got to have a little bit of luck on their side, and they've also got to attack in certain ways and do different things. And I think the fact that Willock and Osula was so good in this performance really does bode well for the future. I'll be at Manchester City next week, hopefully, so I'll bring you a video from the Etihad after the game, but I'll also bring you a video later in the week as well. Thanks so much for joining me. Like, share and subscribe. I really appreciate all the support, as I said earlier, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.